We've heard this morning from a number of speakers, academics, executives, entrepreneurs, investors about some of the challenges in implementing strategy in this widely acknowledged to be a disruptive age in which we live. Now, you've been at a company for more than 2 decades that has, in a way, disrupted itself several times and reorganized its forms. Am I right that it's been 2 decades since Yum was spun out of Pepsi?
Yeah, so October the 7th is the 20th anniversary of being separated from
being
Pepsi.
listed,
And being listed
New York Stock Exchange, right? Yeah. And a year since you spun out your Chinese division?
Yes.
And I can speak, as I was the last 5 years based in China, Yum is phenomenally successful, KFC particularly in China, and with an incredibly innovative, localized cuisines. You almost wouldn't recognize the menus if any of you in this room who are not familiar with Yum in China. Extraordinary success and footprint the company has there.
Correct.
But again, you spun it out.
We did.
Can you tell us, just as a starting point, what is the philosophy of this sort of serial shifting in strategy? What's driving it? Obviously, you can monetize things and bring more investors to the party, but what's the bigger idea behind it?
I think the biggest idea that anchors all of us is our culture. And it was interesting what Mark spoke earlier about. For me, if you're going to transform a business, if you think about business school, we were sort of taught strategy, structure, culture.
Right.
I believe it's actually culture, strategy, structure.
You turn it on its head.
Yeah, in fact, I teach a class about that because I don't think you can write a strategy that can get executed if you write it absence the culture.
I hope that gurus from the various business schools in the room are taking notes from a man at the cutting edge of all of this, yes.
Well, I'm not sure I'm at the cutting edge of it, but I truly think that if you write a strategy in absence or in isolation of the culture, the chances of you executing that strategy really well, I think, are diminished. And so my belief is that, in fact, I teach this class, leading culture to fuel results. I firmly believe that it is culture that actually accelerates your performance. And so for us, yes, we're transforming the brand. We're, we're being more focused. We're franchising off. So by the end of next year, we'll own less than 2% of our restaurants. We're dramatically becoming more efficient. We're getting a.
Doesn't that dilute your culture?
No, in fact, quite the opposite. I think it's interesting because people said, with all this transformation that's going on, what's going to happen to the culture? And my whole point was, no, we're going to leverage our culture to actually fuel the transformation. Now,
give us the next sentence of that, because that sounds almost hard to believe, or you need to persuade us a little more than that.
Okay, well, it's interesting. So if you look at our business, we'll go back 10 years. We were essentially a China-dominated business. I was running Taco Bell. I ran Taco Bell for 8 years. And I remember there were years, I think one year we misplanned, profit plan by like 5 million. And I said to the team, it's not going to matter because China will beat it by 70 million, who cares, right? Well, when you spin off the China business and you say to the organization, and everyone thinks that was the engine of growth, what I said to the organization is, look, there's just so much growth potential in the rest of the business. We haven't leveraged it. In a sense, we just became dependent on China. And so getting the business to believe that it can grow at a faster rate without the China division was one of the challenges. But leveraging our culture, we believe in all people, all the things that matter to us, I actually think, and to some extent, we're on this journey. We've already accelerated our performance. So we've actually performed better in the last, publicly for 6 months because we haven't got our Q3 earnings. But our first 6 months after having spun off China have probably been our best 6 months. And also China improved its performance. So we spun off, I think we were 73 when we decided, we were 83, and I think today if you combine the two, we're like $115. So in my mind, we have less people performing better, and I think it's all rooted in the culture.
And can you define that culture and help us maybe by contrasting it with Pepsi, the culture from which the company came?
Yeah.
I think there was a certain sort of formality, a way of dress, the pretty Pepsi.
Well, it was called Pepsi Pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
The good news is I never got sent on the Pepsi Pretty class. So I think they realized early on I was not a candidate for Pepsi Pretty. Now, I have to be fair. My daughter, who just graduated with her MBA, started at Frito-Lay about 6 weeks ago. So
she dresses better than you do.
She dresses a whole lot better than I do. I think if you think about it, David, when we were spun off, and David Novak ran the business, he basically said the key differentiator was our recognition culture. And it's interesting what Mark was saying earlier. It was a recognition culture for success, but it was also a recognition culture for when we failed. And Tracy Skeens, who's my chief people officer, has a great saying, which is, if you haven't skinned your knee, you haven't run fast enough. And I think it's sometimes people run and they don't want to fall over, right? But her point is, it's so simple and it's true. If you haven't fallen over, you haven't realized what your potential is.
So we touched on this earlier in our discussion with the co-founder of Netflix, that is how to encourage risk-taking.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he made the point that it's not about seeing failure for its own sake or as a red badge of courage in Silicon Valley that sometimes happens.
Yeah.
How do you strike that balance? Clearly, you don't want everyone just failing and getting applause.
No,
We're not in kindergarten, right? Everyone gets a prize.
True. Well, I think that's,
so you're running a business. So what's the distinction between encouragement of risk-taking but not over-glamorizing just silly things?
Well, I think that the cornerstone for me is leadership, which I believe there are 3 key principles to leadership. Great leaders are smart, they have a huge heart, and they're courageous. And so, what I'm looking for to lead the businesses and what I try and teach as part of this leader as teacher is that the thing that I'm sorry to all the academics in the room, the thing that matters least to me is IQ.
Right. You're too smart.
IQ does not define a great leader. EQ, much more likely to define a great leader. And there's some interesting work that's being done now on EQ, which is they call it MeQ. So MeQ is, what is your self-assessment of your emotional intelligence? Do you have an honest assessment? And then the other one that's interesting is called remote EQ.
Oh, what's that?
Well, that's for an organization like mine, which is I'm not actually in physical day-to-day contact. So I've got to influence the organization through emotional intelligence, but at a distance.
Do you install like hug machines everywhere?
No. Well, but I do travel the world. I do travel the world, seeing a lot of people. Then there's heart, and heart to me has 2 components. There's, do you actually have a heart for people? Because unfortunately there's some people who don't.
Sure.
And then do you have a heart for the business you're in? And a great way I measure it is, if you go with people to a restaurant, one of our restaurants, and let's assume there's some trash, does someone actually pick it up and put it in the can, or do they just walk past thinking that's not their job?
Right.
So I'm very conscious of that. And then the last one is courage, which I think the key for me is you can't be courageous in the absence of fear. And so I think often people think, I'm being really courageous. And my answer is, if there was no fear, you can't be courageous. And there's an acronym for fear that I love, which we teach. Fear is false expectations appearing real. And so what I try to say to the organization is, look, all the things that we worry about that are fearful, 99.9% of the time do not happen. So let's not let the fear stop us from being innovative and from trying things and from challenging ourselves and all that sort of stuff. So,
when you look to your company's future and you think about the strategic direction you're headed, what is the fear or challenge that you are most preoccupied by? What keeps you up at night?
The fear for me was not so much a fear, but the challenge is, do I have leaders that are smart, hard, and courageous? I love it because when you work at Yum, it's not obvious what you do, right? If you work at McDonald's, it's pretty clear. So people often say to me, Greg, you work at Yum. What does Yum do? What business are you in? I go, I'm in the people business. They go, you're in like consulting. I said, no, I actually sell tacos and chicken and pizza, but I'm actually in the people business. And I fundamentally believe that in order for us to execute any strategy, if you think about strategies in the middle of culture and structure, well, the culture is what I think is most important, and the structure is essentially the people. So in order to get that strategy to be executed, you really need great people and you need a great culture.
And what do you do to find the right people and to give them the right sort of cultural indoctrination?
Well,
how do you get them to think?
Sure. Well, there's 2 things. First of all, if you work at Yum, you get a culture rating every year.
What's that? Tell me
So
about
you get a performance rating. So, let's assume whatever your KPIs were.
Sure.
And then you get then you get a culture rating. And the culture rating is not a score.
Okay.
You either are learning the culture if you're new, you're lacking, that's not good.
That's not good, yeah.
You're living the culture, or the pinnacle is you're leading the culture. Oh. So when we do when we have annual assessments, I would, VJ, I'd say, hey, this is what you did on a performance sense. This is where we've got you on a culture sense. Right. You're a living. This is what you need to do to become a leading. And basically, the leaders of the future will have high performance scores and obviously be leaders of the culture.
So this is very interesting. Give us a tangible example of how one becomes a leader in the culture attribute.
Sure. Okay. Well, the difference between, and funny, I teach a class about really what leading culture to fuel results. I was in Dubai last week and Delhi last week teaching it for a whole day. So living the culture is about me the contributor.
Right.
Leading the culture is about me, the facilitator. So, are you just a person that, you do your thing and you've got great MeQ and all that sort of stuff? Or are you someone who steps out of that role and really becomes an influencer of the organization. And the other thing is culture has to evolve.
So is this about being proactive, or about teaching others, or is it about contributing new ideas for innovation?
Yeah,
because it still sounds a little woolly here.
Well, it is a little woolly because people say to me, well, it's subjective, right? The lawyers hate it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, let's be honest, the lawyers hate it because on the one hand, you've got this very performance-driven assessment.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, someone's made a subjective assessment of your culture, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can imagine the lawyers hate this stuff. But in my point of view is, if I don't make it clear that culture matters and that you're going to get a culture rating and that leading is better than living and living is better than lacking and all that sort of stuff, then I'm fooling myself that culture really matters. If I don't go out and teach a full day, I mean, I've taught.
But if I get a poor rating, I'd want to know what it is I did wrong, or what can I do better?
Well, so we teach a class. The class is about, basically one of the exercises in the class is what is the difference between, lacking, which is pretty obvious,
right,
living and leading. And I'm just trying to sum it up. I mean, there's a whole bunch of attributes.
Right.
One of the funny things I think that's funny is, remember the song it's a stairway to heaven and a highway to hell, right?
Yeah.
When we teach the class, I remind people that it is a stairway to get to be a leader of culture. Mm-hmm. It's a very simple slide to go back down to living and lacking.
Right.
So you have to work at culture. You have to make sure that the people you hire, when I interview people, when they get to me, it's not about their functional capability.
Yeah.
We've assessed their functional capability well before they get to me. Mine is really a culture check. Mm. So, if I'm interviewing a marketing person, I'm not asking them some brand positioning question. I'm really just trying to work out, are they going to be successful? Are they going to help, build this culture?
How do you know when you are doing these kinds of assessments for promotion and for further development of people, who are the people that are really going to be helping you deliver on your strategy? That's one of the things we've been trying to connect all day,
right,
is, again, the concept of the strategy. And a lot of the studies, including the one that's on the table that everyone has in their hands, suggest that many companies fail on the execution,
sure,
trying to figure out how to do better, the connection between designers and deliverers, as it were.
Right.
How can you tell when you have this sort of interaction with someone who's brought to you as, hey, here's an up-and-comer boss, have a look at this person, whether this person's going to get it and do it, or is this a harder task than that?
No, there's no guarantee, right? I mean, this is an art, not a science. Right. I mean, there's science behind it, but ultimately it's an art. But I always say to people, listen, if you're going to join us, I always say, this is a much bigger decision for you than for me. Mm-hmm. Because, we've got this culture, we love this culture, we're going to grow this culture.
Right.
So you need to choose whether it's the right culture for you to start with. Yeah. Because it's not, you probably shouldn't join. So I have I'm Australian. We're about as blunt as you can be. As we jokingly say, we call a spade a shovel. So, I'm like, this is a much bigger decision for you to make than for me to make. Mm. Do we get it right all the time? Of course we don't get it right all the time. But I think we get it right a lot of the time. And that doesn't mean we don't have to perform. And it doesn't mean we don't, strategy. I'm not saying strategy isn't important. But I just think strategy in isolation of the culture and the capability to deliver it has less chance of being executed.
We've talked a lot about, particularly in the panel about sustainability that was on earlier, shifting consumer expectations and how that drives companies.
Yeah.
Again, I think 23 years you've been with the company.
True.
What are the most important shifts from your consumers have you seen? Sure. And how's that affected your business model?
Well, food has gone from fuel to an experience worth sharing. And millennials, basically, I believe their philosophy is if it's not worth sharing, it's not worth doing.
So how does it affect my taco?
So it affects your taco in a number of ways. First of all, we now have a Doritos Loco Taco, which was one of our biggest, that became $1 billion brand for us. And it's, in partnership with Frito-Lay. And that's in itself an interesting story on innovation. But we do other things. So if it's an experience, it's not just about the food. So innovation for us is not just about food innovation. It's about innovating the customer experience. It's about innovating the asset. It's about innovation, like Taco Bell the other day announced we've got a partnership with Forever 21. So you're going to be able to go to a Forever 21 and buy Taco Bell, clothes. From Forever 21. And so,
it's thinking outside the bun.
It's definitely thinking outside the bun. So it's, because I think, it's interesting. That's very good. There's a funny story in that, but that's too long a story. But, you've got, people want brands that are Taco Bell's a great example. It's a $10 billion brand. It will turn over $10 billion in the US. But we want it to feel like it's a $10 million brand. Because millennials don't want to be attached necessarily to $10 billion brands. They want to be attached to a $10 million brand. So
what does that mean? Social media?
But one of our philosophies is less is more. I'm a huge believer in two things. Focus.
Yep.
So the organization, just focus on 4 things. So for us, it's like build distinct, relevant, and easy brands. It's about unmatched franchise operating capability, bold asset development, culture, and talent. And I say to the organization, if it doesn't fall under those 4 things, we're not doing it. That's sort of part of it. But part of it is just sort of saying, we're going to build this cult-like brand by doing less. I'll give you a good example. This is fun. So we took this copper wire that cost like $2, and we turned it. We actually made the words Taco and Bell, so you could put 2 rings on Taco and Bell. And it cost $2, okay? It probably cost 20 cents, but we probably paid $2, who knows? Anyway, it's not the point. Now, what would you normally do? What you would normally do is try and sell millions of these things, right?
Right.
We limited it to 300.
Just 300?
Yeah, because somebody really, really wants to be one of 300. They don't want to be one of a million.
Right.
And so I think you've got to look at things in the context of it's not always about more is more. I honestly think less is more.
Right.
So we will often actually do less than we could commercially do in order to build the demand and the want and the uniqueness or the cult-like status of this brand. And so you can't get caught up in, we'll make 100,000 because we probably could have sold 100,000. But that's not the point. The point is millennials want to be the first in their neighborhood. When we did promotions with Xbox and with Sony, we didn't give away 6,000 everywhere. We gave 1 away in every restaurant. Because millennials don't believe anyone wins $1 million.
So this is a new spin on hunger marketing.
Exactly.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
Let's see if there's any questions from the floor. Please collect your thoughts. While they do get their thoughts together, let me follow up. You have talked about courage, talked about failure. Can you talk about an example in your career or in the companies while you've been there where the company stumbled badly, just got it wrong, and how you recovered from that?
Yeah, I mean, we made some acquisitions in the past that did not turn out to be particularly good. So, we bought Long John Silver's and A&W. And then in China, we bought a company called Little Sheep. I think the combined write-off is $1 billion.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't mean we're not interested in, doesn't mean we're not in the buying brands business. But what it said to me was, we've actually got so much growth in the 3 brands we've got. Everyone says to me, you need to buy a burger chain because you don't have one. But burgers are growing slower than any other part of the category. So I don't add shareholder value by buying into something. What I'm better off doing is accelerating the growth I've got in the 3 brands. And so what we're doing is looking at what can we do to enable growth of the 3 brands rather than M&A is not about buying another brand. It's about just saying, so we've invested in a Pizza Hut digital ventures project. So
what does that mean?
So in London, we have a group of people in a startup company. They're in those startup buildings where everyone's looks like they don't belong at Yum.
Yeah.
And they've basically developed our next generation, platform, web platform and mobile platform. Traditionally, we would have gone outside, bought someone else's capability and brought it inside. We started this like a company within a company. It's called Pizza Hut Digital Ventures. We funded it, and it's really proving to be an enormous success. We have a company called...
Basically, they do the IT for the pizza delivery, is that right? Or what is
yeah,
it they do?
They do it, but in the past, we would have always outsourced that because we said, look, we're in the food business.
Right.
But no one knows what we want better than we do. I mean, I bought a company called Collider. They're an insights company.
Okay.
Very small acquisition. They have, I jokingly said, if we had an employee of the year, it would be Collider, because they have helped us on every brand across the world.
What do they do that's different?
They basically get to what I call cultural insights. And I think often what happens is that insights that you get are not really rooted in culture. And the great thing about our business is we're in 129 countries, with 3 brands, and I think whatever the combination is, ultimately what you've got to do is understand, we're a global brand, we have global brands, but we are literally people live within their cultural insights. And getting to the depth of cultural insights is really important. And so I call them enablers. So Collider is an enabler for us to grow faster. They don't actually they don't make a product, they make us smarter.
But the way they get these insights is different from other companies?
Yeah, we have 10 people. They also live in their own little place in Santa Ana. They're not in a Yum building. They don't wear Yum. They don't dress. Well, I don't dress like this either normally, but anyway, they don't dress. And so we have demographers, sociologists, anthropologists, social anthropologists, essentially PhD dropouts who really didn't want to become a professor. Sorry, guys. They really wanted to go to business. And we send them all over the world. I mean, I've got a group that's going off to Saudi Arabia. I was in Dubai last week. We have a new franchisee. They need help in Saudi. Who the hell's going to help them?
So you send your crack team of ethnographers, anthropologists to figure out culture.
And they have done, and sometimes it's really simple. We had a problem with KFC France. We just couldn't work out why our business wasn't performing well. And so all of us who've been around the business a long time, we went in and we pontificated. And, the operations aren't right, or this isn't right, or they're not breeding the chicken right, or whatever the hell happened to me. The answer was we'd lost our cool. We were no longer a cool brand. And now, obviously, we now have to do things to make the brand cool again. That's just a simple example, but they have been... So those are sort of investments we're making to enable the three brands to grow faster rather than trying to buy another brand to make the company grow faster. That's really the point I'm trying to make.
Is your main competition McDonald's, or is it something else?
Well, I think...
How do you think about your competitive set?
I think our competitive set is ourselves. It's interesting. I don't think we're in the fast food business.
Right. So how do you define your...
I think we're in the global franchise food preparation and distribution business.
Okay.
Now, the current expression of that happens to be fast food.
Right. But what could be another possibility?
Well, you think about it. First of all, we've got to do things that are global and we're going to be franchised. But there's a number of ways to prepare and distribute food. We actually have pretty much one way of doing it, though we have delivery. But there are many ways I think we could actually distribute our food. Now, so those to me are all growth opportunities.
I mean, just give an example. You're teasing us here. How else would you deliver?
I'm not going to give it away.
I don't want to give. I'm not going to robots deliver the food, teleportation. No. I mean, what are you thinking about here?
Well, the obvious one will be delivery, right? So that millennials want everything easy.
So chicken wings drop from this.
No, I don't think. I'm pretty sure we won't be doing drones. I also am a pilot. I don't like these drones flying around with little planes flying around, but that's another point. Anyway, no, I do think that what will happen is delivery will grow.
Right.
But the other interesting thing that's going on is millennials are urbanizing, right? Our business model is essentially a suburban drive-through business model. Well, they're not going to the suburbs. So we've got to find solutions for basically how do we penetrate back into urban markets where, we've not, I think we maybe have one Taco Bell in Manhattan, which is ridiculous. So we need to get 50 or 100. So we've developed this idea called Cantina. So Taco Bell Cantina is a small footprint, inline, no drive-through, serves alcohol. We serve beer.
Like that. That's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Beer. Well, I'm check one of these out.
I am Australian, so no. We sell beer. We sell what we call twisted freezers, which is essentially our freeze with a twist of vodka, and we sell our traditional range. We bring local artists in from the community, so the restaurants have a feel that yes, they have Taco Bell, but they have a feel of being a part of the community. All open kitchen, so you can see in the entire cooking process. It's totally transparent. We've probably built 10 or 11 of those so far. Franchisees have built most of them. The first one was in Wicker Park in Chicago. It's a huge success. In fact, I was with the franchisee that built the first one. I was with him probably 2 months ago, and he drove me around Chicago, and we looked at where he's going to build another 4 or 5. So I think finding urban solutions for a business that was traditionally, suburban.
Right.
I think delivery is an opportunity for us. Whether you have to deliver out of a storefront or whether you can deliver out of essentially mini commissaries, I think those are opportunities. There are so many ways for us to grow this business, limited only by our imagination and how much perspiration we're prepared to put into it.
All right. Well, let's come back to you, give you a chance in the time remaining. Does anyone have a question for our CEO on stage? I think our conversation is keeping them wrapped with attention, either that or the stupor of a heavy lunch.
Yeah.
In which case, let me then. See, I think there's a lady here who's rising to the challenge. What do we get a microphone here, please?
You know why she's asking this question? Because I took the last plate for lunch, and she was behind me, so I have to be really careful.
Yeah, we have to watch out for this
Don't be vindictive
question.
now. Don't be vindictive.
Exactly.
Exactly, you got it.
Please identify yourself.
It was really very nice to hear you. You know, I like these.
Please identify yourself.
I'm Anshu Kak. I'm from IBM. The question that you mentioned one thing, culture. Mm-hmm. And the measurements on culture, which was very fascinating because usually we do, performance and reviews and all that stuff. So how can we get that change in such a huge company like IBM on the culture aspect of it? Some insight on that.
You mean the culture itself or assessing culture?
Assessing culture.
Well, I've decided that, when you're the CEO, you sometimes just get to do what you want to do, right?
Okay, tell my CEO that you're meeting her.
I'm going to be with Ginny later this week, so I pretty much just sort of said, I think we should give ourselves a culture rating. I didn't decide what the four were. Someone came up with the four of them. And I was like, we started with the more senior people first, and then we cascaded it down to the rest of the organization. So anyone in a leadership position in Yum knows what their culture score is, knows what they have to do to improve that culture score. And equally, it now makes me accountable because when I appoint someone to a senior position, everyone's going to know whether this, I can't go appointing people who aren't leading the culture as well as, delivering great performance. So what I love about it, it holds me accountable to make sure that I don't just put in someone who relentlessly drives results, but not the right way, that I make sure that the people I appoint are delivering the results the right way. Otherwise, if the person at the top's not making it. So I love it because everyone knows where they stand. Yes, it's subjective if there's a lawyer in the room, but it also holds me accountable to make sure that when I make pretty senior appointments, people go, yep, that woman or that guy or that person is a culture leader.
There's a question here in the front row. Let's get the microphone over.
Margaret from Siegel & Gale. So Greg, an implicit theme throughout your commentary is change management.
Right.
And the need for continually managing change or affecting change. Any comments on what's effective in terms of moving a strategy to execution, yet retaining the same talent?
Well, part of it is we've also had to get some talent in. It's very clear that we needed some digital talent we didn't have in the organization. So you have to be honest with yourself and say, look, if we're going to transform the business around these four growth pillars, which we identified, you have to be very clear and honest with yourself, which is the MeQ part of it, which is we just don't have the talent in the organization because it wasn't a priority in the past. And so we have gone out and hired some really amazing talent because without them, we're not going to execute. And it also means we've had to let some people go because they're not areas we're no longer focused on. But I think the organization believes we're doing it within our cultural context for the strategic reasons, and we were honest enough to say we just need this help and assessment.
A quick question, quick answer in the time remaining.
Sure.
Please identify yourself.
Greg, I'm Ray Edikula. I'm from Walters Kluwer. Very thought-provoking talk from you. Thank you for that. But a quick question. Do you think by having a cultural rating, are you concerned that you might get stagnated in your culture? There are no innovations going to happen or changes in your DNA as an organization?
No, I'm not worried because remember what we value most is smart heart and courage. And I actually have a little badge. Even when I visit restaurants, I have a little badge. It's all about smart heart and courage. Every time I get up in front of anyone at Yum, I talk about smart heart and courage. I talk about the courageous successes and I talk about the courageous failures, including my own. You know what's amazing is everyone wants to hear your failures because it sort of makes you feel more human, which is true, we've all had them. But they also want to understand how you use that failure to learn for something in the future. And so there's some, we don't have time, but I remember David Novak would share his Crystal Pepsi story. I share a story from when I was at Unilever. We've had some major, mistakes. But the point I also make is it hasn't stopped us getting to be the top of the organization. Goes back to if you don't skin your knee, you haven't run fast enough. And if you create that culture in which that's the norm and that's expected, people will really go on a limb and try some, now it's freedom within a framework. It's not, as you said, it's not crazy stuff, but I think we are more innovative because of our culture.